very difficult. I think this is easier if I had to compare them. It's all about markup and markdown. And, you know, the basic concept is when you own a business, you buy a product from your supplier, and then before you sell it to the customer, what do you do to it? You buy at a certain cost, and then you mark it up above your cost. In other words, you raise the, whatever it costs, you can go above that so you can earn a profit, right? That's markup. Now, what is markdown? That's the opposite. Markdown. No, well, it's possible. Or you might be taking less of a profit. It depends. But that's, you know, it's a good point. So, not always a loss. Markdown is when they put something on sale and they're trying to move it out, either because it's out of season, out of style, out of demand.
Or
perishable. There's many reasons. So the marking's down. A good example is when the bananas start to get ripe in stores. You notice how they always mark it down from the previous price, which was higher. So I'm going to give you 5 formulas. What should I use for this? Darker. Hold on. Need that?
Barely.
And I'll read it to you. Give me 1 second here. MU. Does it look like a B? I don't see B in there.
Here. Yeah, you forgot the tail.
It doesn't have a point though. Okay, and there's 2 more. I'll put them over here. It's actually 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 7 formulas. I'm sorry. 7. And I'm going to go over these, so don't worry. Okay. Oops. Wrong terminology. I know it's getting far over here, but I think in a minute.
Bless you. Is that original price equal?
Yes.
Bless you. Or minus sales price? Is that equal or minus?
What's that again? I'm
You
sorry.
have original price, is that minus sale price or
Yes.
equal? Oh.
Minus. I'll go over 1 by 1. You know, it's hard to see if you're way over there. I know that. I'll go and read them out 1 by 1. How about that? Okay. There was a reason that I separated these. Okay. So if you have to come over here for a minute and you want to jot it down and go back to your seat, you can do that too. And there's one more. So, 7 brand new formulas. Yeah, it might be best for you just to go and get up in the copy that's on. And then I'm going to go over each one and explain it. Does this look familiar at all? Okay, now as I'm going through it, you want to take some extra notes. In other words, what is SP? What does that mean? What is C? What is M? I'm going to define all of that as we're going through it. Selling price, not sales. Big difference.
Huh? Yeah, B. Yeah. B equals first. Selling price?
Yes.
C is cost.
Okay. All you're doing now, open the PowerPoints. What's going on?
Okay, close out of that window right there. Now hit OK. Now try it again.
Why is Adobe open? That's crazy. I've never seen that.
Because you made it into an Adobe format
No, I didn't.
somehow.
No. PowerPoint. Okay, let's go over what these things mean. So right now I'm talking about this board. After that I'll go to the PowerPoint. That's going to fill up our hour, and then we'll do the quiz next time we meet, which is quiz review, which is Monday. Okay, I'm going to start on number 1. Does everybody have these written down?
Yes.
Okay. What do all these things mean? SP, selling price, equals cost. I usually just put in C, by the way. I didn't notice that. But C equals cost plus markup. Selling price equals cost plus markup. Think about what's happening there. The price that you sell your product for, the selling price, it costs you something to buy it. If you own a business, it costs you, right? And then you add in the markup, you mark up that price or that cost, and you sell it to the customer for a profit. Otherwise, you couldn't be in business. Has anybody noticed what I did with number 2 and number 3.
You
You're subtracting
turned them into
instead of adding.
subtraction.
Okay, so where did we learn this? Back in chapter
10 or 11.
further back.
Eight.
This is 8.
5.
5, thank you. What was the name of that chapter? Solving for the unknown.
I know.
Okay, so just like we did with the interest formula, I'm doing the same thing with the selling price formula. This is your base. Think about like your base, the foundation. And then what we've done is we solved it for C, cost. Maybe I'll put C in there if that's less confusing. We solved it for C right here. And then right here we solved it for markup. So you see what's going on here? In the problems, it will ask you to give the selling price or what else? Either the cost or the markup. So you take this formula, start off here, and you turn it into whatever they want. Do I have to go over how to do that? Because we've done it, we did it in chapter 5, we did it in chapter 10. How did I get from here to here, 1 to 2?
What?
How did I get from 1 to 2?
You're finding for a different.
Right, how did I get there though? How did I get this?
You subtract markup from both sides.
Thank you, I subtracted markup from both sides. So you want to isolate C. If they ask you for cost, and the problem, what is the cost? Then you would subtract markup, because you want to get rid of, you want to isolate C, get rid of markup, and you got to do the same thing the other side. So selling price minus markup. You see how we got that? Now the same thing applies here. How do we get from 1 to number 3? I subtracted what from both sides? Cost. Very simple. Okay? So they're going to ask you for one of those 3 things, or maybe more than one. Over here, let's write some extra notes. Number 4, this is markup based on cost. Or you can just write that in if you want. Markup based on cost. The second one is markup based on selling price. In the problem, it will ask you for one or the other. You might get 1 or 2 problems where they ask you for both. And I'll go over examples of how to do those. Okay? Ready for the next one? And you know what this means, right? Markup divided by cost. I keep writing that word cost in there. Markup divided by cost, and this is markup divided by selling price. Not sales price, selling price. Just make sure you don't get those 2 confused. Okay, 6 I broke down into 2 steps. I should have put A and B there, actually, but I put 1 and 2. Okay? So, you start off here. Original price minus sales price equals markup. Original price minus sales price equals markup. So, when you go to a store and you take advantage of a sale, what happens? You can see the original price, they put a line through it, and they have the sales price written below it. And if they really want to try to screw with your mind, they'll have 2 or 3 original prices scratched through to make you think that it's been marked down 2 or 3 times. Which maybe it has been, but that's not always the case. Some of the things they can do in price advertising is just bordering on legality. Some of it is unethical. If you do a lot of shopping like I have in the past, comparison shopping, where you know what the price of something, or what the price of something should be, and you go see it on sale, you know if you're really saving some money or not. Does that make sense? So, once we get the markup, we need the markup first because in part 2, you have markup divided by original price equals percentage. I forgot something right here, percent sign. Percentage markdown. That's important. Add the percent sign. Percentage markdown. Okay, with me so far? Number 7, the last one. You'll have one or two problems on this. It's the break-even formula. Does it sound familiar? If you had other business classes, you might have come across it, or accounting, or economics. In other words, a company produces a product at a certain cost. They're going to sell each unit they produce, each unit, which is the U here, stands for unit. Each unit will be sold at a certain price to cover those costs, the total costs. Costs are broken down into two different categories, fixed costs and variable costs. So that's what this stands for. FC is fixed costs. Fixed, with an ED on the end. Variable costs. Variable. Okay, now what does this P stand for here?
Price.
Price. Now, I told you just now that the U stands for unit. So this means what? Price per unit and variable cost per unit. Price per unit minus variable cost per unit. These are very easy problems. They're the least of your worries, okay? They're not the emphasis of the chapter. This is. Okay. Any questions so far? All right, if you look up on the screen, some of the things I just mentioned are there. What they do is they define it, if we haven't done that yet. I define cost, I define selling price already. We defined markup. Expenses, here are examples of common business expenses. Rent expense, wages of salaries, utilities, what else? Advertising, insurances, taxes, a lot of stuff. In the end, do you have a net income or a net loss? In other words, at the end of each month or each period, what you do is you subtract your total expenses from your what? Subtract total expenses from sales revenue, and you get either a profit or a loss. Does that make sense? Okay. Ready for the next one. All right, here's our base formula, basic formula. Look at the example they give you. It's a partial example, all right? The selling price, we're going to sell this item, which is a pair of jeans, for $23. How much do we pay for it? $18. So you can do that in your head. How much is the profit? $5. The profit also represents what? The markup. So markup equals profit. Usually. Or at least in this sense. Okay? Are you with me so far? All right. Is anybody printing these out? I don't see why everybody doesn't do that. I don't understand. It's so easy. I mean, it's so much easier, you know, to just make your notes on there.
You can go and look back at it.
Huh?
It's easier just to look at this one.
Oh, okay. Well, I just feel bad when I go to change the slide. I look back and I see people still writing. Are you drawing the pictures or no?
Oh, that's
I know you're not. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about markup based on cost. Markup based on cost. Okay. Let's break this down. Look at the formula. Selling price equals cost plus markup. It's the same formula here. All he did was what? Flip it. So don't be confused by that. Now we're going to think of the cost as and this will make more sense when I get to an example, trust me. Okay? The first thing you have to do, let me just tell it to you this way instead of looking at that. If you know that you have to use markup and cost, in the problem, if they don't give you what the markup is, what does that tell you? You have to find the markup. And they will usually give you the cost, or vice versa, and then you just plug them in. and you're going to get a percentage. Okay, you're going to get a percentage for your answer. Or you're going to turn it into a percent, right? It's going to be a decimal, and you know how to convert it. How do we do that? 2 places to the right. Okay. So this, I wouldn't worry about the slide too much, okay? If you're following along what I'm saying right here, markup based on cost. And all it means is, what is the percent markup based or considering what it cost you, what that item cost you. The only difference here is the markup is based on selling price, okay? And again, you're going to turn your answer into a percent when you're done. Let's write that on here.
So for equations 4 and 5, what exactly are we looking for?
The markup based on cost, the markup based on selling price.
Okay.
It might make more sense when we get there.
Yeah, because all I see is markup divided by cost, and I'm like, what am I looking for?
Once we get the problem with the words, I think it'll make more sense.
Okay.
As long as you're following where I'm at right now.
Yeah, no, that's
You'll be
fine.
okay.
I was just curious.
You know what a markup is, you know what a cost is. Yeah, we're going to get there. And when we get there, if you don't know, then let me know.
Okay.
If you're still having trouble with it. All right. Okay, one thing you should notice first, I'll point to this. Markup divided by cost. We're still talking about number 4. There it is for you. All right, markup divided by cost. And here it is again, the markup value. So what is the first thing you usually have to do, like I just said 5 minutes ago? Find the markup, and they're going to give you the cost, usually. Look at the problem. Gap buys, there's your key word. Fleece jackets for $18, that is your cost. They plan to sell them for $23, that is your selling price. Now you're going to need these 2 numbers, right? Because you got to do selling price minus cost gives you the markup, because you need to use it here. So what often happens, what usually happens is you're going to use this formula and this one in those types of problems. And you'll also use, just like with this one, when you get to this formula here, you're going to also use number 1. So, I don't know if you want to make a note of that somewhere, or try to use without being messy.
So if you use 4 and 5, you're gonna use 1.
Yes, usually. Unless they give you the markup in the problem. Okay, moving right along. What is GAP's markup? We got that, right? $5. What is the percent markup based on cost? All this is asking, and this might answer your question, what percent is 5 of 18? What percent is 5 of 18? So 5 divided by 18, if we plug those in, what do you get?
27.78%.
27.78%? Is that right? Or 27.8%? Oh, it's up there?
Yeah. It's
It's
right
like,
there.
how did you get that in your head? I knew about where it was. Yeah, this is the check down here. I never reference these, okay? But, do you see what we're doing here? It's right there also. Very simple. These are not hard. Plus, you get to do it at home, so you can have your formulas right there. And I'm sure you do, right?
Busted.
I'm jealous because back when I was in school, I couldn't do that. Everything was in the classroom.
I was really surprised when you said it. Yeah, I was like,
Check work.
that's not
Well, it's
normal.
why not? I mean, you use the McGraw-Hill website. I mean, you do your work at home.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna have, I don't have computers in here for you to do your work here.
So we're not complaining, trust me.
No.
Makes a lot more sense actually.
All right. What do they want from us here? Now, this does get slightly more complicated depending upon the problem, okay? So stick with me. Right here, they're asking us to find selling price. Okay, so which formula do you use?
Number one.
Number one, the base formula. Look at the problem. Mel's Furniture bought a lamp. They bought, so that is your cost for $100. See where it fits in? To make Mel's desired profit, now this is where things take a turn. Okay? To make Mel's desired profit, he needs 65% of markup based on cost, or 65% of markup on cost. Now you have to think about this for a minute. Look down here. 0.65 times 100. What is 100? 100 is the cost, right? And we're multiplying or taking 65% of that cost. So this right here represents M. You see why? Because the markup is 65% of the cost. Do you see how to plug that in? Because you're going to get a few like that. It's a little tricky at first. Now it's easy. 100 plus 65, right? 165. The hardest part was this right here. Knowing how to plug this in from markup. Any questions on this one?
I didn't see that as a formula.
Huh? Say again?
If you turn 65% into decimal point 65 and you're $100.
No, I understand that, but I don't see it.
Yeah, it's right
It's
here.
a formula right there.
Cost. What's your markup?
Well, I put in SP for selling price. They put, sometimes you see S, SP, S.
I'm just not seeing multiplication, is what I'm saying. This shows
Oh,
multiplication,
that's
but
because
there's-
of this right here. And that's why I paid
Okay,
broad special attention to it.
so that's a separate formula itself,
Not really a formula, just a separate step.
an extra step.
We're going to go over this more on Monday too. Okay, so what do they want from us now? They want cost. Which one are we going to use? Number 2. Let's see what we have here. Jill. She owns Sports Incorporated, sells tennis rackets for $50. So she sells them for $50. That is the selling price. To make her desired profit, she needs a 40% markup based on cost. Now compare this to the problem we just looked at. Do you see how it's similar? To make her desired profit, she needs a 40% markup based on cost. So the markup is equivalent to a 40% or 0.4 times the cost, or C. Now the reason we don't have a number in here is because what? We don't know what C is yet. But do you see how we set it up? You have to be careful right here. Does everybody see how that works? The markup is 40% of the cost. 40%, 0.4 times the cost. Question? Do you want to ask me after class? That helps. Or,
I don't think we're
I mean, you're on
gonna
anybody's
know what
level.
the cost is.
We're going to find out.
Okay.
Well, that's what we're solving for.
Yeah.
We don't know
So
what
how-
cost is yet. We're going to find out, though. So once we get to the end, let us get there at the end. Let's see if it makes more sense. Okay, the third step. We have 50 divided by 140. Why is that? Because we took 1C plus what? 0.40C, or 0.4C, equals 1.4. You don't need that 0. 1.4, right? Excuse me, I should be pointing right here. 1.40C. Okay? This is the third step. And then this will be the fourth one, actually. Okay, so the third one. $50 equals 1C plus 0.4C. Together, those make 1.4C. Okay? Now, we want to isolate C. What do we have to do to both sides?
140.
Divide both sides by 1.40. Because we want to isolate C, which we are doing. These cancel out. We have C left, and then 50 divided by 1.4 is 35.71. That's your cost. That makes sense. What else do they want from us here? What did the tennis rackets cost Jill? What is the dollar markup? So they're asking you for the markup also. You know how to get markup. How do you get it? Number 3. And some of this you can do in your head, you know, after you play with it for a while. It depends upon the numbers, but we take the selling price. Where do we get that from? Up here. Minus the cost. Where do we get that from? Over here. And we have the markup. So those problems are going to ask you for both, usually.
So the price would be, the selling price would be $64.29.
Actually, no. The selling price is 50. She sells them for 50. This includes the markup. The markup's already in there.
So that's what the problem is asking for, how much she.
What did she pay for?
getting,
Yeah.
which is 35.70.
Yes. Got it? Okay. Any other questions? I'm so glad we're on something different.
Or you get tired of
Chapter
it.
10, 11, that I formula, yeah.
They were fun.
Well, it's fun because it's easy. Okay, markup based on selling price. Which one is it? Number 5. How is it different from number 4? The only thing that's different is the denominator. So you change cost to selling price. That's the only difference. That is the only difference. You work it just like the previous problems. So markup based on selling price. Now I want you to ignore this, just like the other one. Let me go to the next slide, okay? And concentrate on this. This gives us everything. Do you recognize the example? Just say yes. Maybe you're sleeping, maybe you're awake. I have no choice but to be awake. In here. Anyway, it's the same exact problem, except what are they asking us for? What is the markup, and also what is the percent markup based on selling price, not cost this time? We just changed one little thing, okay? So you see the formula for markup. You know how to get that, right? Once you get the markup, you do what? Divide the markup by the selling price. So the markup divided by the selling price. When you get your answer, you have to remember to do what with the decimal?
Move it 2 places to the
2
right.
places to the right, just making sure.
And you need to make sure you round up to.
Whatever they tell you to round up to. Usually the hundredths.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? Ready for another one? Okay, look at this one. This example is a little tricky, only because of the coefficient. You know, we always have a coefficient of 1. If a variable is by itself, a letter is by itself, A, B, C, S, whatever, there's always a coefficient of 1 in front of it. Remember that, right? Okay. So calculating selling price when you know cost, they're going to give us cost, and they're going to give us percent markup based on selling price. Okay, so follow me closely. Mel's Furniture, it's the same one, right? Yeah. Bought a lamp for $100. That is your, because you're the business. No, you're not the customer, you're the business. So don't be confused. This is a business buying inventory that they're going to resell. That is the cost. To make a desired profit, you need 65% markup of the selling price, or 65% of the selling price. Look here. To make this desired profit, once you see that, what does that mean? Just like the other two examples, desired profit should alert you, because that means you're finding the markup.
Oh yeah, markup.
Markup. 65% of the selling price. Do you see why we have 0.65 times S? It's like the other problem, 65% of S. Now, is it simplified so far as you can go right here? So far, right? Okay. Look at the next step. Look at the next step. What are we trying to do? We're trying to isolate what? S. Now we have S on both sides. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
So we have to get it to one side. Question?
You do the one side, you have to do the other side.
That's correct. That is always right. You do one side, do the other side. We want to get it to one side. Okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to take it away from this side. To do that, we subtract 0.65S, which is going to cancel these two out, right? Okay? And then we subtract 0.65 over here. Now, try to follow me. This doesn't show it the best way. What are you left with? You're left with 100, and then 1S minus 0.65S gives you 0.35S. Do you see that? That's kind of tricky. That we got a couple times. There's a 1 in front of the S here. We subtracted 0.65S from both sides. So S, 1S, minus 0.65S is 0.35S. So this is where we are right now. 0.35S equals 100. Do you follow me so far? Okay, because these two cancel out, right? You have 100 left. Now, what do we have to do next? Isolate the S. Get it totally alone. How do we do that? This is a multiplication, so we divide by what? 0.35 on both sides. So it's going to cancel out here, and you're left with what? S. And then 100 divided by 0.35 gives you 285.71. So, that being said, I don't think, if I remember correctly, I don't think you have anything that's exactly like this in the quiz. Where you have that one coefficient, thing. I don't think so. Any questions? We're not done yet. They also want the dollar markup. Now we got the selling price, we had to do that first. And if you notice, they will ask you in the problem, in order. They ask you in order, in the order that you have to calculate, right? So they ask you for the selling price first, then they ask you for the markup. You take the selling price, come over here, plug it in for S, right? And then we have the cost, that's 100. And there's your selling price, or markup, sorry. Any questions on that part?
That's a rather pricey lamp.
Tiffany lamp.
Yeah, jewelry's much worse. The markup on jewelry is probably
What if
50%.
they're selling a lamp, why are they showing a refrigerator?
I've taught this course 10 times in the last 2 years, and I've never noticed that.
Professor Bell,
Interesting.
I still don't understand how you got 3.5.
That's fine. You gotta ask, that's fine. Okay, for anybody else that might not understand too. What we did, and what you have to do when I'm going through this, you have to kind of block some of this out. That's why I always say, okay, we're right here, because I don't want you to look at anything below it. If you do that, that might be confusing. So just stick with me on each line, all right? So right here, we have 100 plus 0.65S. We want to get S on one side, one or the other, okay? We can't have it on both sides. we have to get to 1. We're going to get it to this side. So what we have to do is subtract. To get rid of this 0.65s, we have to subtract 0.65s. This is going to cancel out. You see that?
Okay, I see.
And then we subtract 0.65s from 1s.
I see how you put
So
that.
1 and 1
So it's
point
1
zero
minus 0.65.
Yes.
Like $1 from 65
I
cents.
got you.
Yeah.
That's all that.
You just have to put an invisible mark.
Are you ready for another one? What do they want from us here? Is anything different? Calculating cost, we need a selling price and percent markup on selling price. Okay. So which formula do we need? We're going to solve for C. Now, I want to point out something that I just thought of. I didn't mention it earlier. They start off with the base formula, and then they solve for C. You could do that, or you could set it up like this from the beginning. It's your choice. Did everybody hear that? They start off with the base formula in all these problems, in most of them, and then they lead you up to, or they solve for C. You could also start off like this and plug in things and solve for C. You see what I'm saying? So
So you're saying number 2 is better than what she's got up there? Easy.
I think so. Okay, we have Jill again, selling tennis rackets again for $50. So she's selling them for $50. That is the selling price. To make her profit, she needs 40% markup, 40% of the selling price. Okay, desired profit. Again, what does that mean? The markup. 40% times the selling price. That's your markup. On the next line, we have $50 equals cost plus 20. How do we get the 20? 0.4 times 50, or 40% of 50 is 20. Isn't it? You could also say 2/5. You know, you think about it that way. There's many ways to think about it. Anyway, okay, so here we are right here. We've gotten the markup. The next step is to do what? Isolate C. Well, to do that, we subtract 20 from both sides. Do you see why? Because this is going to cancel out. We're left with C. And then on this side, you have 50 minus 20. Right? Same thing on both sides. 20. And you get 30 for your cost. There's the cost. Now, they also asked you for what in this problem? The markup. Where do we find that at? In step number 3. You found it along the way. It all depends on what information they give you in here, how many steps you're going to have to take here whenever you go to work it. Depends on what they give you here and what they're asking for, you know. So I'm sure you'll be all right. Are you ready for another one? Don't worry about this, you don't need it. Markdown. Which number is it over here? Number 6.
16.
Let me take a look at how they're showing this here for one second. Hold on. Okay, yeah. They do mention the word original. I just want to make sure. Okay. All right, let's go through the problem. Sears marks down an $18 tool set. Now, if they're marking down an $18 tool set, that means the tool set was what before they marked it down? $18. So that is your
Original price.
original price. Do you see how we got that? Normally, that's what it would be sold for, the original selling price. You plug it in right here. They're marking it down to 1080. To 1080. Now what did I show over here? Original price minus sales price equals markup. The first part, number 6. And that's what's happening right here.
You just take the 1080 for the 18.
Yes, and then that represents what? The markdown. Not markup, but markdown. It should be the least of your worries. So we have the markdown divided by the original selling price. What was the percent markdown? That's what they wanted, right? 40%. Pretty good markdown, I guess, for the customer. Do you see how this works?
So part 1 of 6, the action should be a B instead of B.
Yeah.
Oh.
Down, you're saying markup.
Right, thank
I was using the trust them in that freaked out.
you. Change out your notes, it's markdown. I was in markup mode when I got to there, I guess, so. Thank you. Always ask if in doubt. Markdown. Everybody got that? Markdown, MD. Ready for another one? I think we're getting towards the end. Okay, I'm not going to require that you do the perishables problems, which was the previous slide I just skipped.
What the heck is TC and TX in it?
Huh?
Well, you said the
Oh,
perishable.
all that stuff? Yeah, don't worry about that stuff. Yeah, TS,
And TC.
all that, yeah, skip it. Okay, so contribution margin. Let's make this real simple. This formula I gave you over here, number 7, this is what we're doing now. The bottom part of the formula where it says price minus variable cost, that is the contribution margin. Price minus variable cost is the contribution margin.
Which one is that one? Oh.
Last one. Last formula. Now, if you get a problem that asks you for the contribution margin, you know how to get it. Okay? If I remember correctly, I don't think there's anything that asks you specifically for the contribution margin. What I ask you for is the break-even point. BE, the break-even point. What is the break-even point? That is the number of items. It is not a dollar number. Get that out of your mind. It is not dollars. It is the quantity of items that must be produced and sold at a certain price in order to break even or cover your costs. Does that make sense?
I'll say it again.
Okay, break even. It is the quantity that must be produced and sold at a certain price in order for the business to break even or cover their costs. If you're a business student, you're going to hear this many more times in the future.
Well, then repeat that one more. Quantity of.
Okay, I'll do one more. Just one.
Just one.
Okay. It is the quantity of items that must be produced and sold at a certain price in order to break even or cover all of your costs. Should I write that down?
Sold at a certain cost to break even,
Say again?
sold at a certain price.
Right, sold at a certain price in order to break even or cover your costs, which means the same thing. So the break-even point represents a quantity of some good that is sold, not a dollar amount. Not a dollar amount. Which is what a lot of people probably thought, right? Oh, you learned this 30
See, I
years ago?
didn't see that
That was
definition
McDonald's.
or something.
We knew how many donuts we had to sell or break even. Everything after that
It's
was all
profit, exactly. That's what we're doing here. So it's a very important concept. Again, one of the most important things in this course, which is de-emphasized in this chapter, but It's one of the most important things, is break-even analysis. And you'll learn more about that later. Now, what's before I go on? I don't think you're going to see this in your problems, but if you do, it's price minus variable cost, if they ask you for this. Okay?
Well, they set it up differently than ours.
Huh?
It has the, done just a different.
Oh, you ahead of me?
Oh, maybe I'm not.
No,
Yes, I am.
oh, you're one.
Oops.
You're on the last one.
This is the last one. Last but not least. Okay, look at the formula. Break even equals fixed cost divided by, trust me on this one, price minus variable cost. See what says contribution margin? They mean the same thing. But if you make the formula the way I'm telling you, when you go through the problem like we're going to, it'll be easy to plug in. Okay? Take a look. We have Jones Company produces pens. They have total fixed costs. What are fixed costs, by the way?
What it costs?
No.
A cost that can't go marked up or down.
I think you know what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
It's a cost that
It's a
doesn't
set
what?
price.
Say it again.
It can't be inflated.
Doesn't change.
I mean.
I think you know where you're going, but
Doesn't-
it doesn't change. So a cost that does not change with increases or decreases in production, such as what? Rent on the building. What else? Manager salaries or employee salaries. What about wages?
No.
Wages are variable. What is a variable cost? A cost that
Fluctuates.
fluctuates whenever we increase production or decrease production. Keep that in mind. Now we're going back through this. Fixed cost of $60,000. Plug it in for fixed cost. Each pen, so unit, right? Like I wrote over here, price per unit. Each pen sells for $2. That is the price per unit. Why did they have an S there?
Sales.
Selling price. Same thing. Yeah. So you got that? That's the price per unit. The variable cost, you just plug it in, 80 cents per pen. Okay, let's figure this out. You don't have to do anything with these letters. You don't have to do any solving. Don't be confused by that. They're just there to let you know what these numbers represent. You follow me? So all you do is calculate the numbers. 60,000 divided by what? $2 minus 80 cents. Now what should you do first? Do the bottom first. Thank you.
1.2.
And you get 1.2 or 120. Okay? And then 60,000 divided by 1.2 gives you 50,000. Very simple problem. So what does that mean for us as a business, as for Jones Company? They have to produce 50,000 of these pens to cover all of their costs. What happens after they produce more than 50,000?
It's all profit.
They start making profit, right? So until they produce and sell 50,000, produce and sell, they're not profiting.
Well, that can't be right.
It is right.
Well, if it's.
What's wrong with it?
Okay, tell me.
Do you see what's wrong or what's not wrong?
Yeah.
Okay, now one more thing. If I asked you, what is the dollar value or how much in dollars do we have to sell, in dollars worth of pens do we have to sell to break even? How would you find that?
$2.
50,000 times $2. Thank you. So that gives you 100,000. So you have to sell 50,000 and with $2, you're going to rake in 100,000 bucks, and at that point you have broken even. Sounds like a lot. So if you're selling just pens, that better be a good pen. Yeah.
Your box of 8, package of 8 pens, and multiply that by 50,000 packages.
What's that?
If you sell them pens in an 8-pack, and then you want to divide up 8-pack by 50,000, and then you need.
Right. They don't usually sell in ones, right? Even a 10-pack, that might be easier.
Unless you got like a $10.
So we done?
Yeah.
It's really
Okay.
nice.
Any questions about anything?